Okay, a few more people might trickle in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody. My name is Sindhu Nathan. I am the Vice Chair of Communications at the National Science Policy Network. I imagine most people here connected with this workshop through NSPN, but just in case you are not a member, I just really quickly want to share what the National Science Policy Network is. It's an organization primarily containing early career scientists and research engineers interested in science policy, communication, diplomacy, and advocacy. And we work on a variety of things. Like I mentioned, I'm on the communications committee. But there are a lot of different teams working on things related to science diplomacy, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, reforming and enhancing graduate education, and election-related efforts. And in fact, the op-ed track is actually something that started off as part of the election initiative at the National Science Policy Network. But as one registrant kind of very astutely put it, the work isn't going to stop on November 3rd. And we hope that the skills that you learned today are something that you can translate well beyond election day. Before I hand off the screen and mic to Dr. Luci Herman, I just want to quickly iterate, there will be a couple of random breakout rooms during this workshop where you get to workshop either your piece, or if you didn't have a chance to write, workshop your buddy's piece. It'll be random. But if you indicated an interest in having an accountability buddy to kind of finish publishing, I have made some assignments for that, and you'll get an email either tonight or tomorrow morning introducing you to that person, and you'll get to peer edit and work your way to actually publishing that article. So with that, I would like to hand it off to Dr. Luci Herman. She is, like the bio you might have seen on the registration form, a PhD in English with an emphasis on political rhetoric, and has taken her expertise to the Stanford Law School, where she's a lecturer and the director of the Stanford Law School Policy Lab. And that's actually where I met her. I participated in one of those policy labs on climate change mitigation. But in addition to those roles, she offers a lot of practical training on effective communication, especially in this policy space. She's really interested in helping people become strong policy writers and communicators, and has taught workshops like this one many times. So I'm really excited to learn from her today and happy to pass the screen to her. Oh, actually, one last point. I will kind of be a moderator, like just in case you can't see the chat. So if you are interested in asking a question, you are welcome to send it to everyone in the chat, or just send it to me if you want me to ask it anonymously, and I'll make sure that we pause and are able to get your question answered. So
thank you, Sindhu. This is really a novelty and an honor to be invited to speak with all of you and get to learn from you, read your op-ed drafts, and potentially continue to work with you over the next month or so as you refine those drafts. Before I say more about myself and what we're going to be doing in this workshop, I want to hand off another introduction to Deborah Stein, who we are fortunate to have here today as an observer. And I thought this would be a great moment for her to introduce herself to you and tell you a little bit about some of the projects that she's engaged in, where you can also learn much more about policy skills. Deborah, please.
Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. So I run a virtual science and technology policy academy where individuals like yourself can learn about how to do policy analysis. I do talk about communication, but not to this depth of level. But sometimes when you're trying to figure out like what to put in an op-ed, you need sort of the analysis behind it, right? As opposed to just your opinion. And so what I do is teach you how to do that policy analysis. I wanted to mention that, so I also go into other techniques like benefit cost analysis, and I have a free workshop that's coming up that's sponsored by the Idaho State S&T Policy Fellowship Program. And some of my students are here today because I was able to sort of let them know. So if anybody's interested in learning more analytical techniques, I'm going to put the links to my website and this upcoming free workshop in the chat. So you can join if you're interested in learning more about how to analyze different policy options to figure out what to say in an op-ed.
That's a fantastic opportunity, and it's one that I hope that I get to participate in as well. So thanks so much for being here. So this is, I don't know, probably my 40th or 50th time leading an op-ed workshop, but I've never led one just for science writers. I've always led them for public policy writers in a wide variety of different public policy fields. So the fact that you all are interested in policy and the fact that you want to get your work advertised tells me everything I need to know about you. With the attack on science, we need more public voices, and you can do this. You can take a look at the research that you've done already. Sometimes the title of your latest research piece or even your dissertation can be quickly adapted into a title, a nice neat title for an op-ed, and then you just have to figure out how to make that op-ed speak and really resonate with your own voice to speak out to a public audience. So we're going to give you some techniques today. I have to tell you that I taught at the Harvard Kennedy School for a number of years, and one of my specialty areas was op-ed writing. My other specialty area is just straight up policy writing, and I teach a lot of that at the Stanford Law School. But in teaching op-ed writing to researchers, pretty much across the board, that there is an inclination to overthink it. And by that, I mean, you tend to resort to complex arguments. You rely sometimes on jargon or on your expertise in the field in a way that is alienating to a public audience. Now, there are audiences that you can write for in terms of commentary. We'll talk about that at the end of the presentation today, where that kind of expertise is rewarded and desired. But because the op-ed accelerator for the NSPN is trying to push you to really get out into a public forum, we're going to focus much more on kind of that lay language and thinking about what your target audience is with that lay audience. So we will be working off of a Google Drive today. Here it is in the chat. If you haven't got it open, go ahead and open it. It's where you housed your op-ed draft. And the way that this is going to work today is I'm going to give you some material, and then we'll do a 15-minute breakout with a partner. The partner will be random today. Maybe it's somebody that you really resonate with and you'll want to continue that partnership beyond today. If not, doesn't matter. Sindhu has very nicely partnered you up with people in your area, and so she will pass that along after the workshop is over. The idea of the partnership is that you can't write well without having readers, editors, audience feedback. And I'm curious, and let's just see a show of hands. You can just raise your hand on screen. If you don't have your screen on, you can turn it on for a few minutes. But let's see a show of hands. How many of you already have a writing partner? 1, 2, excellent. Okay, I'm going to call on Seema. Could you just talk a little bit about your writing partner?
Sure. She's Nelly, and she's here as well. And we are both actually members of Genetic Society America group, and that's where we meet each other. And we are both interested writing a piece about the current policies on international scientists, scholars, because most of those policies actually directly affecting us. And yeah, we would like to advocate for this.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad you have a partner. Everybody else, I hope you're listening. The only reason I got my dissertation done is because I had a really fantastic group of 2 other writing partners, and we all just shared the experience together. That's what op-ed writing is about. And so I am going to challenge you now to think about forming an op-ed writers group. And ideally it would have 2 or 3 people in it, in addition to yourself. And they would ideally be interested in your area, but not experts in your area necessarily. And the reason for that is because you're trying to write outside your kind of boundaries and reach out to this broader audience. So if you can bring in people that are interested and educated without being experts, you are actually doing yourself a favor. As we move forward in into the month of November. The goal here is that the piece that you are starting, hopefully today, is a piece that you will actually be sending out by the end of November for publication. And so this is a ongoing kind of educational endeavor here that we're starting with this workshop, but it doesn't stop here. It doesn't stop until you're published. And once you're published, it'll continue again. And so you'll just continue this cycle. So I hope that I am instilling, good op-ed writing skills in you and this kind of incentive to keep moving forward. All right, I am going to briefly share my screen. And I just want to show you a couple of materials here. So this is the shared folder. After today, after you have made changes to the draft that exists there. And I just want to say that I've read through many of these drafts, and I will talk a little bit about that as we go forward. But my goal here is that you will go in and revise them, improve them, build in the skills that you're learning today, and then I can give you some feedback. So look for that feedback over the next couple of weeks. If you don't get it when you want it, just email me and say, hey, Luci, I'd like to have some feedback. I think it's ready now, and I will gladly provide it. The things that I'd like to show you here in this folder are the guiding materials. And so here I have the little, 3 featured op-eds. We'll talk in depth about one of them in particular, but I'll highlight a couple of features out of the others. I also wanted to just pull up and show you a couple things here. JS is Jeff Seglin at the Harvard Kennedy School. He's my former boss at the Harvard Kennedy School. He runs the communications program there. And he is an op-ed writer extraordinaire. That's all he does. In fact, they hired him because he is a columnist. And at one point, he was considered one of the 100 best columnists in the world. He got some kind of accreditation for it. But this is a really nice, tight little one-pager of the what he calls the classic style of op-ed writing, which is what I'm going to introduce you today. It doesn't mean that you have to restrict yourself to the classic style. It means, like, as we know, like any rule is there to be broken when you need to break it. Just have a good reason to do so. The other things that are here that are super useful are the NPR, how to write a really strong lead. We'll talk a little bit about a strong lead today, but this is a really nice article that will take you through, like, step by step how it is that you are targeting an audience, reaching an audience, hooking your audience, making sure they understand your argument, one step at a time. And then finally, I've got the PDF of the presentation that I'm about to give to you all today. And then here in what I called published and or op-eds you admire. Once you publish your op-ed, would you please do us all a favor and put a copy in here? And you might just have to cut and paste in, a draft, because you may not be able to get it off of the site that you publish on. But put it here for the rest of us to see and admire, and just be inspired by. And similarly, if there's an op-ed that you particularly admire in terms of style or structure or whatever it is, put it here. We would love to learn from you. This is a great forum for conversation. And if you put a little header on it of, like, I like this because, and then put some of the kinds of stylistic pieces that you admire in it, that's the point. We are not looking for content per se. We are looking for style and structure with the assumption that the content is strong. And so please don't put things in there that are, maybe actually that would be interesting. I was going to say, don't put anything in there that isn't strong in content. But at the same time, that could be interesting if it's strong in content. I mean, if it's weak in content and then strong in style and structure, because that says something about good writing that is selling disinformation. So we don't want to do that, but you could highlight it. It'd be interesting. All right, so that's the end of the Google Share Drive. I will stop that share. And now I'm going to pull up my presentation. We're going to have 2 kind of breakout sessions. One about midway through for about 15 minutes. You'll be working directly with your partner at that moment, and they will be reading your draft and you'll be reading their draft, and you'll be giving each other feedback based on what we have done thus far in the presentation. And then we'll have a second breakout for about 5 minutes where I'm going to introduce to you a SWOT as a tool of understanding the kind of evidence that you want to produce and how it is that your audience will digest it more readily. And it's a very short little moment there. And then at the end, we'll leave you with another probably 10-15 minutes to go back, visit with your partner, do a little bit more speaking about the draft now that you know even more, and set up another time to meet if you wish. So that's how the breakouts are working. And now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with the op-eds. Let's make sure I'm doing the right one. Yes. So this is, oh, where'd my slides go? There we go, right there. So this is it. These are basic guidelines for op-ed and opinion writing. By the way, if you have any questions along the way, just use the little icon to put your hand up, or you could just speak out if you wish. That's totally fine. I may not see the icon because I've got my smaller screen on, but hopefully Sindhu will see it, or you could just put your question in the chat, and then Sindhu will be monitoring the chat. And in fact, as I'm thinking about it, probably that's the best way of doing it, is putting your questions in the chat, and then we can just monitor them and we can bucket them at different points in the presentation. So feel free to do that. All right, and so with that, here we are. You have been called. The moment is right. There's something that's happened, an event that you have got to write about. And so here's your moment, and you're going to write an op-ed about your cause. And so whatever that cause is, it is something that you have dedicated your life to understanding, probably. And if not, it's something that you have become an expert on in some other forum. And so there are some basic rules for this classic style of op-ed writing. I hope all of you become such good op-ed writers that you break these rules all the time. The idea is to take this very complex thought and turn it into an extremely simple message. And so, download that brain into just one simple message of 800, 1,000 words if you're going to be publishing in a local venue. And ideally, you could even express it in kind of an elevator pitch of maybe one sentence. This is the op-ed accelerator for the NSPN network. And so I'd like to take just a moment here for Sindhu to tell you a little bit more about the accelerator and why it is such an important tool to you. Sindhu, do you want to go ahead? I'll stop share just for a moment.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so like I mentioned, the op-ed track was kind of a part of the 2020 election initiative at the National Science Policy Network. The accelerator is just kind of like a tool that we use to help members write and publish op-eds in their local outlets. So we put together calls that are related to important issues happening that are related to science and science policy in the moment. So I think someone mentioned kind of like the role of international scientists. That is a particularly important issue right now, and we had put out a call related to that a little while ago. We help those writers through the writing process, editing process, help them refine that pitch and get it sent to that local outlet. So that is just like one avenue that we have used in the past to promote op-ed writing. And although it was part of the election initiative, we plan to continue that well beyond the election day, because this is an important tool to communicate about science and science issues that are happening beyond a presidential election cycle.
Great, thank you. One of the things that I was intrigued about by the op-ed accelerator is that it actually does link to published op-eds by NSPN members. And so the op-ed that I'll be featuring today, which was written in the classic style and published in the Dallas newspaper, is listed on this op-ed accelerator. So spend some time, browse the links that they have. I think you'll see some good models of writing there. Why is this not? There we go. And so the reasons that you need to do this. So you are developing your credibility. You are putting yourself out there. You are expressing yourself as the expert in your field. And so this is an opportunity to frame your research in a very tight way for the public. You're planting your flag, you are building your impact and influence, you're raising your profile. You may receive invitations to write more. And so not only from other news organizations, but from field organizations, field journals. Don't be surprised. You'll certainly receive invitations to symposia and conferences. This may also lead to collaboration. Once you start putting yourself out there and people start to know your name, people will approach you and say, you know, I'm working on a similar project. Would you like to learn more about it? And potentially you will all become collaborators. And then of course it raises the NSPN profile. It raises the profile of your organization, of your university. So it's a win-win all the way around. One of the ones that we'll be featuring today is from Catherine Cruz, who's an NSPN member, and she published in June, Southern Dallas doesn't need more COVID-19 testing sites, but more accessible sites. It's a very nicely written, tight, very well argued piece, and I would sure love to know if the Dallas Public Health authorities actually followed her advice. Seems very straightforward that they should. So you're spreading your message, and I'm curious, and so I'd love to see a show of hands again, except that it's so hard on Zoom. But I do have a challenge for you. This is Twitter that I featured here. You're spreading your message through social media. And so let me come back to that in just a moment. So you're first going to target your publication. You have to think about the audience that you're writing for. If you were in my full-on class, we would spend an entire class session doing nothing but doing some positioning around understanding the audience. Go to that publication, look at what they write, figure out what their style is, see if it fits with the kind of style that you have and that you are willing to write in, and then mold yourself into their style or find another publication where your style fits better. Think about social media. This is Twitter. I'll come back to that. Tweet and post to your accounts first and then tag others. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And that'll kickstart the issue. And now I'd like to just spend a moment on this social media question, which is if you don't already have a Twitter account and you're going to be writing op-eds, get a Twitter account. And the reason is because it's a way for you to start amplifying the work that you produce. This is an interesting moment here because you'll see that the Dallas Morning News picked up Catherine Cruz's article, Southern Dallas Doesn't Just Need, but they didn't tag her. Same thing with Obed Manuel, picked it up, actually named her, did not tag her. Bishop Dunn picked it up, actually posted a picture of her and did not tag her. And I thought, gosh, I wonder if she doesn't have an account. In fact, she does. It's hard to find, but we'll see it at the very, very end of this presentation. But if she had posted this first, like if she had just gone, you know, like it was running and she just quickly ran it as like, you know, I just published or, you know, see my new piece and tagged the Dallas Morning News, they would have in turn tagged her. And then similarly, others would have picked up that tag and she would be tagged consistently. Why is that important? It's just building your credibility is all. So yes, question, go please.
Yeah. So with regard to Twitter, should it be a professional account or is it better to be a mix of professional and personal?
I am always assuming that it's a professional account. So yeah, and yeah, you probably want to use, you know, some kind of fun little acronym for your personal account, and then for your real name, that's your professional account. So yeah, that's a great question, Sindhu, because many of us mix it up. But I think in general, you're going to get followed because of your professional work by other professionals, and that's what you're trying to write in the field for. So yeah, and then you're welcome, of course, to post it to your personal account as well, but always tag your professional account when you do that. And just know then that that makes your personal account much more findable and linkable So for better or worse, depending on what you decide to post on that. I just know that I have a lot of friends who on their personal accounts will post, pretty strong, messaging about different opinions, but then on their professional accounts, they are, very, straight up and very balanced. And so if you don't know that they don't have that personal account, then you always just think about them professionally. And I think that's probably a good thing in this area.
Actually came up. So talking about being identifiable, is it a bad idea to use a pseudonym or like use a name that's different from like your official like legal name?
I think it's up to you. Most of the people that I follow professionally use their own names. And you can kind of think about that for yourself. Like, who do you follow professionally? Who do you follow as an expert? It's usually somebody who's posting under their own name, but not necessarily. Once in a while, it's not. But I think that it makes a lot of sense if you are publishing in your area of expertise to use your name, because you're trying to amplify yourself as that expert. Anybody else? Okay. Other areas that you could post in are LinkedIn. And so I featured this one, Jasmine Benjamin. Check out my op-ed regarding the evolving nature of biomedical research publishing during the era of COVID. And she tagged the Sci Policy Network, thanked them for editing. Look at that, isn't that fabulous? And that's just like good practice. So there it is on LinkedIn. Actually, I think that one was from Twitter, but you could do the same thing on LinkedIn. NSPN may also potentially pick up your piece and post it forward. And so you'll be picked up off of NSPN as well. And so it's helping to reframe the debate and deepening discussion and certainly heightening your credibility. And I love it when I see these hashtags, especially if the hashtags actually have a conversation that flows out of them. So sometimes that's useful. And so what can you do for them? Why should they adopt your view and the steps they need to follow to take action? Those 3 points are what we're about to engage in. And so here's some guidelines. You're looking for an event. It's an opportunity to write. There are 2 kinds of op-eds. There's the current event op-ed, which you have to get out immediately. Your editor is going to want it, that day or the next day. So when a current event comes up, don't wait a week. Do it that day. Ideally, you will have something kind of ready. In other words, you can kind of see something on the horizon percolating, and you go ahead and you write a draft for it. It happens, you quickly revise the draft and you submit it immediately to whatever your venue of choice is. And for current events that are super, super, timely, ideally you're supposed to give a week for an op-ed editor to get back to you or just make a decision. But for super timely events, you can just tell them in your pitch, I'm giving you, 48 hours, and then I'll have to send it to somebody else. So, because you definitely want to get your name out there if you can. So then obviously you've selected your forum, you think about where you want to publish, your research is illuminating something new, and you're taking a stand. Now there's another kind of op-ed which is called an evergreen, and the evergreen piece is where you can write it at any time and the editor can run it at any time. And so on a slow news day, which doesn't seem to ever happen anymore, the editor will look at what they have in their evergreen file and they will pick something out of that. So if you are writing in an area of research that has real resonance, but could be published pretty much at any time, know that the editor is going to put that in your evergreen file. They may be willing to take it. They may even pay you for it, but it may not run for quite a long time, depending on what the news cycle is like. And so we're going to talk today a little bit about the lead or the news hook, the motive and theme. The lead is spelled that way in journalistic terms. You can also spell it LEAD. Evidence, arguments, research. There's usually a turning point in your piece or something that is called an ask, where you are asking the protagonist of your piece to do something, or you're asking your reader to do something, or sometimes it ends with an epiphany of like, aha, I got it. That's amazing. That's so interesting. It'll have an open ending where you are leaving your reader thinking about something that it's, there's no answer necessarily. There's something else that has to happen, kind of a next steps piece that happens beyond the actual frame of the op-ed, or it'll have a closed ending where you basically have summarized the argument and you've nicely tied it up in a bow, and you've told them all that they need to know. So all of that framed through cogent argument. And I won't have as much time today to spend on concision, but that's something that you and I can talk about in the editing consultation that we might have. So this is you're hunkered down, you've got so much research, and how the heck do you make sense of it into a nice tiny little frame? Well, you're going to do that. You're going to compress it into a nice box, tie it up with a bow, and you're going to do it by talking about first the news hook. News hook is probably the most important thing in an op-ed, and the reason is because it captures the reader's attention. When I was reading through your drafts, I noticed that many of you took time to distill your arguments into nice, tight opening paragraphs or sentences, but it was rare that there was a catchy kind of sentence that hooked me in with a mystery or an assertion or a stand, or something that I that seemed counterintuitive. The news hook grabs the reader's attention, and then it unpacks in the rest of the piece. So you're going to hook the reader with a compelling lead. A good lead has an opening hook that seizes on urgency and the critical nature of the problem. It has a motive. And so what's your reason? Why do you want to do this? And so there's you're trying to compel somebody to action. You're trying to get something noticed in particular. It frames the problem and it may point towards the solution. We'll talk about these in just a bit with some examples. It needs to be direct and to the point. And usually, not always, but usually those opening sentences are pretty short and compelling. Sometimes you'll see longer opening sentences that, just basically put the bottom line up front argument that are a bit longer, but I like the nice, short, catchy ones. It should underscore why your issue matters and be, why today? Why does this have to get out there today? So there's that sense of urgency again. So this is from Catherine Cruz's article. I circulated it, and if you had time, perhaps you were able to read it. It's a pretty quick read because it's less than 1,000 words, very typical of the number of words that a local journal will require or a local newspaper will require. And the lead is that opening sentence. Dallas is the tale of two cities when it comes to COVID-19, the haves and the have-nots. One sentence. And it tells everything, I think. It has the tale of two cities. I want to know the mystery. What's the other city? That's really interesting. And when it comes to COVID-19, okay, I'm already thinking like, okay, Dallas is either a good thing or a bad thing, and I want to know which. The haves and the have-nots. And now I understand that she's talking about equity, and that's her motive here. She's trying to compel Dallas to take more of a lead and to be more cognizant of equity in the COVID-19 space. And now the next paragraph is where we head into motive and theme. So that we've got the hook, now we're moving into motive and theme. So the motivation for writing, the theme is the argument, the thesis, the kind of general theme that you're going to be tackling in it. Now her first paragraph has, she reversed it, I think. You can argue with me if you want, but I think it's theme and then motive, which is totally fine. And so theme, the pandemic, got it, has severely impacted communities of color, continuing theme, and laid bare extant health disparities. And now I know her theme is about equity. Equity in the context of the pandemic, equity in terms of health disparities, and it's right there in the first sentence. And so I've got a nice hook and I've got a nice theme, and I'm like pulled in and I still have a mystery because I still don't know who the other city is, and I still don't know where Dallas lies. And now she's going to tell us who those other cities are, Houston and San Antonio. The motive is at the very end of this, where she reveals why she's writing. And so the end of that first paragraph is the ask. Dallas County public health officials must prioritize Southern Dallas communities, which face greater barriers to testing. And so that's her motive in writing this, getting Dallas County public health officials to act. And she will build out her evidence around that. So with that, I'm going to give one breakout session here where you all are going to do nothing but, I'm going to stop my share here for just a moment and look at you all, look at your beautiful faces. Hello. And so you all are going to have about 15 minutes to partner up and do nothing but think about that opening sentence and that opening paragraph. You're trying to capture hook, motive, and theme in an opening sentence and an opening paragraph. Now, you may have already broken some of those rules in your draft, but let's try just for today, just for the sake of the exercise, going ahead and repackaging them into this kind of classic format. So, take off your expert hat and put on your student hat and be like, okay, I'll be willing to just try this out just for today. So we are going to do a breakout session for 15 minutes, and then we're going to come back and I will give you, the rest of, what I think you need to know. Great. Okay, Sindhu, please. Any questions while Sindhu's putting in breakouts before we go forward? Just go ahead and call it out if you have a question. Okay, excellent.
So in the breakout,
oh yes,
I
please.
have a question. So in the breakout rooms, like how many people will be there, and how do you start the conversation? Like everybody may have a draft, and so
okay, so let's say Pawan, you've been paired with Shreya, and you say, hello, I'm Pawan, this is my draft. You can pull it up and you can share it on your screen with each other. And Shreya says, hi, that's great. Boy, I wrote about something similar. That's so interesting. And then she pulls up her draft and she shares it with you, and you give each other feedback, but only focusing on that opening paragraph. Like you can skim the rest of it if you wish, but don't give feedback on the rest of it. We're just focusing on that opening paragraph for today.
Okay.
Excellent. And this is actually, we don't have time for it, but I would love it if we had time to go around and introduce ourselves to each other and learn a little bit about our interest areas. You'll do this in your breakout room. And unfortunately, I'm going to be the one who doesn't ever get to learn until I get to meet with you. But we're coming from, I think, all over the world. I think somebody is here from Latin America, and I can't remember, Peru maybe, and Uruguay. For example, and all over the United States, etc. So it's pretty exciting to get to see you all doing this together. So go ahead, Sindhu.
Okay, ready to open them. So see y'all in 15 minutes.
Great.
Okay, I think that is everyone back.
Excellent. Welcome back, everyone. And so I just want to take a moment here before we start to ask if anyone would be willing to share just some of the thoughts that you practiced in your session. And so we don't need to share screens, just talk a little bit through the process of what happened. And so if one set of partners would be willing to just be brilliant and amazing and generous and speak out, that would be great. So go ahead and just speak.
I can go ahead and speak.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Me and my partner discussed specifically the leads of our stories, and I think the lead is kind of like you said, where a reader decides, okay, do I understand this? Is this interesting to me? What's going on? And so we both went through each other's papers and kind of decided, did we understand what was going on? And Neil actually told me that I needed a stronger hook, which I totally agreed with. So her feedback was really helpful. And especially she said that she's not familiar with voting in this country. So kind of clarifying that process and saying like, why should, she might not necessarily be my target audience, but if she's reading my piece, you know, like, why would she care about this? Or what does voting have to do with anybody in this country, kind of thing.
And would your partner like to speak a little bit also about the process for her?
Yeah, sure.
Great,
No, I think it was really nice. We read each other's post and then tried to come up with a better way to start. So for mine, which is talking about international student visas, similar to SEMA, who we talked about or who talked earlier, I had started by asking if you read this on your iPhone, or if you read it if you just attended a Zoom meeting or something like that. But I didn't really explain. I tried to talk about how that would not exist if. Sorry, I'm already going through the thought process here, but I had written that these are some of the ways that international students have contributed to the American economy. But Shreya said that that was not entirely clear to her what I had meant there, so I had to be more clear. So it was, for me, it was very helpful to see, oh, okay, I had too many thoughts in my own head and I didn't manage to actually put them on the paper.
Or sometimes you try to pack them all into one sentence and you just need to break them apart a little bit. Yeah, fantastic, great. So did the two of you have time to actually rewrite that opening sentence? No, you just gave feedback on it. That's totally fine. And another kind of trick on that too is if you have a really dense argument that's going to follow, but you need to have a really catchy opening hook, you can sometimes use a metaphor to do that. And so a metaphor, like, have you done, ever done X, or, we understand why, and the metaphor will kind of encapsulate the process of what you're about to explain. And I'll try to give you an example of that in a little bit. But let's go ahead back into the presentation and move on to evidence, which usually comes in threes, by the way. You may remember that if you've ever studied Aristotle and rhetoric. So I'm screen sharing and I want to get to my slide deck. Come on. Hello. There we go. Okay, so that magic number 3 is resonating for us. So hold on to that magic number 3. You're going to use that magic number 3 to help your audience understand your issue. And this is just classic journalistic, who, what, when, where, why, how. But it also works for an op-ed. And I have used this signposting of who, what, when, where, why to break out and parse how the writer that we're studying, Catherine Cruz, uses evidence. And so let's take a look at that. When you go into my deck, you'll have this at your disposal. This is just a checklist for how you can plug your evidence into that who, what, why, how kind of framework. I won't spend time on it right now. So this is going back to the Catherine Cruz piece. And so on one side, you see the who, where, what, who, where, why. And I'll just explain as I go through. This is the first full paragraph where she had her opening hook, and now this is the first full paragraph. We understood already who the who was, but she reiterates it here in sentence 2. And actually, I think one of my circles disappeared here. There's supposed to be actually a circle around Dallas County public health officials. And so pretend like there's a circle right here. Dallas County public health officials in that second sentence. I don't know whether you can see my cursor or not. That's the who, and that's extremely important to be right up there at the front. We also understand in that first sentence, actually it's sentence 3, I guess, that this is about Dallas. We got that also out of that lead. But now we're going to do a little bit deeper dive into where. And so now we're going to look, we know that she's actually going to take a really targeted focus on Southern Dallas. And what is she talking about? Testing sites. And so in that sentence here, third sentence in the first paragraph, we have the who, Dallas County public health officials, very specifically. We have a very specific place, Southern Dallas, and we know exactly what she's talking about, testing sites. That sentence carries a lot of weight in setting up the argument that will follow. You need that sentence right up front. It has to be, sentence 2, sentence 3, something like that, to really frame the argument for us. And then we move down at the end of that. She gives a little bit of data here, which is excellent. That sets up her credibility. It sets up the fact that this really is an issue. We understand the logos of the problem here better. But then at the end of it, we see that this is her motive again. This is what she's asking them to do. And so it's a who with an implied what and a where and a why. Dallas County public health officials must prioritize Southern Dallas communities regarding health equity, which face greater barriers to testing. And so all there in that first paragraph, and that's going to be your challenge. I want to make sure that you too are who, what, where, and why in that first paragraph. And so now, oh, I see. I was so smart. I had a click through for those circles. There they are, right there. Okay. And so here it is. Now we're in the second paragraph. Now, evidence usually comes in threes, and so there's going to be, we'll talk about that in just a minute. She's going to have 3 major points that she makes, very typical of a classic op-ed. And each one of those paragraphs helps to explain using the how, when, where, why kind of motif. And so why is it important to your objectives? You have to ask that about why you're presenting that particular bit of evidence, and this I think is important for all of you, what doesn't need to be there in order to make that same point. When I was looking through your drafts, I noticed that many of you had bullet points, which is great. Absolutely use bullet points to outline and to lay out the points as you're getting ready to write. But sometimes there's just too much stuff. There's too much data. There's too much detail. And so you'll see, look at how tightly written this is. It's just like 5 sentences total. They're very short sentences. They're not the typical kind of, longer researchy style sentence. And yet she's captured the how, when, where, why. And we know that this is everything. Every word we read counts. Every word we read is important to building that story of evidence. So here is how she builds the evidence in that short op-ed. She knows that 3 is the magic number. She's got 3 forms of evidence. She offers this umbrella statement. This is paragraph 3. As a Dallas County resident, my ability to receive a COVID-19 test largely rests upon 2 factors: location and transportation options. Now, if I had been consulting with her and had been advising her, I probably would have asked her to go ahead and revise that opening umbrella statement to 3 factors: location, transportation, and insurance, because she brings in this third point later about insurance that just kind of shows up, and she hasn't set us up for it, and she needs to do that in this sentence ideally. The 3 points of evidence are: 1, so we've got location. There's very little testing in my area. There's limited access to it, and then of course there's no public transit to it. If you don't have a car, about transportation. There's only drive-throughs. Walk-ins are inconvenient to public transit. There are very few mobile health units. And so now we understand transportation is critical. So location, transportation. And then she has this paragraph, it's the penultimate paragraph in her piece, which starts with a further comma. And anytime I see a further, I'm like, uh-oh, somebody forgot to bring something in and they're adding it in as kind of a PS. And that can be okay if it's, and this is the way I usually think about it. It's okay if it really is just building off of what's already there and it's just kind of, adding kind of some icing to the cake. But in this instance, that further actually does quite a lot of work with an entirely new argument, which is about the uninsured, the high numbers of uninsured in her community. And so I think she needs to flag that in her umbrella statement at the front. But those are her 3 forms of evidence before she moves into her conclusion. And so she ends with her last paragraph with what's typically called an ask, where you are asking your policy protagonist or your audience to do something. It could also be framed as a solution. And so this is an intervention that has a solution or that will lead to a solution. And so at the beginning of that last paragraph, she reminds us of her motive. Dallas County officials could have avoided testing inequities with an equity-based public health approach. That's my motive. That's what I'm after. And then she asks herself a couple of questions that I think are nice, neat packages for anyone who's trying to end a policy op-ed or even a policy paper. And the 2 questions are basically just mirror images of each other. What would happen if your protagonist, if whoever you're pitching to, took action based on your interventions, based on what you're proposing? What would happen if they took action? And then you say it. And then what would happen if they didn't take action? And that's what you have here, is an opportunity and a threat. An opportunity that would happen if they took action, and a threat that would happen if they didn't. And you have to ask yourself then, what's the most powerful way of persuading your audience that you have the best intervention or that you are right? Is it better to end with that threat, or is it better to end with the opportunity? And I read a lot of op-eds and I think about them through this framework. And I have found that most op-eds actually will end with the opportunity and a kind of positive feeling rather than the threat. She ends with the threat. And I think that's kind of interesting because it's really then a true, flag up challenge to Dallas County officials. And it turns out that she will learn a little bit more about her later on, but it turns out that she actually has some of the expertise to be able to end with the threat and make them listen. So she says at the end, failure to do so will only result in more preventable COVID-19 cases and deaths. That's the threat. If you don't do this, that's what's going to happen. It's also based on what she's thinking of as the status quo. And so whenever you're writing an op-ed, you have to think about what's the status quo that I'm trying to intervene on, that I'm trying to solve for. And here she goes back to that status quo and says, that's the problem. We're going to just exacerbate that problem in major ways. Now, she could have gone even more out on a wing and not out on a limb and even, magnified numbers or something like that. But just having that nice tight little will result in more preventable deaths, I think is enough to signal to Dallas County that they need to take some action. And so the other piece of evidence, if we had time, I would actually do a breakout right now and have you all figure out what your 3 points of evidence might be and how it is that you would like to frame them. But we don't have time. And so I'm going to move on with the rest of thinking about evidence, which is data. Now, the 3 op-eds that I gave you to look over don't have any visualizations in them. I wish they did. But I do have some examples here that I'll show you that do have nice data visualizations. And so if you're using quantitative data, it can be helpful to have a visualization. And before I start on this, I just want to say that the best op-ed visualizations best data visualizations that I see published are in the New York Times, and whoever they have doing their data visualizations is just brilliant, I think. There was one in particular on the cover, I should have put it in this deck. It was on the cover of the New York Times when they hit 100,000 deaths, and you see the red line across the cover, literally the cover, image. You see the red line down at the very bottom of the front page, and then the spike that goes all the way up into the the header of where it says New York Times, and there's this giant spike, which signals that we've hit 100,000 deaths. Super powerful visualization. I didn't even need to read the headline to see that that's what that meant. But there are some just basic ways of doing this, and I just like to remind you all that you all are probably experts in visualizing your data, but simple is better for this kind of a venue. And so these are some very simple data visualizations that tell a story. This particular one, why the NYPD's decision to drop a unit that spies on Muslim may help counterterrorism, tells it through bar charts. I won't spend time explaining, but if you just took 2 minutes to start looking at this, you would see that she's got a nice little header that explains it, and then she explains it in the actual writing around it. Same thing a little bit more here. She's got only these 3 little breakouts, and that tells the story that she's trying to make in her piece. Same thing here. This is Martha Crenshaw. She's a national policy expert at Stanford, and this is There Is No Global Jihadist Movement. And I particularly like this one because her whole piece revolves around this one bar chart. And I won't give away the whole thing here. You can read it a bit later if you wish. But what you can if you just look at this bar chart without knowing anything about this, you can see that there are these weird black breakouts, and you see the red flags in between. And then you go down to the key and you're like, red means rivals and black means affiliates. And then you see that these 2 groups were rivals, and then they became affiliates. Rival and affiliate. And you're like, what the heck is that about, and why? And she explains what's going on with it and why it's so powerful and worrisome about how these relationships are formed and unformed. So it's one really, I think, very well done visual that tells the whole story. Martha Crenshaw, very nicely for us, framed her description of that bar chart through a SWOT. And normally if we were in a classroom, which I dearly wish we were, we would take a show of hands, like how many of you know what a SWOT is? I'm guessing because you're scientists that many of you do know what a SWOT is. If you don't, I will briefly explain, and then when we meet for our consult, we can talk it through in detail around the actual evidence that you're trying to provide. A SWOT is used in public policy, also in business analysis, to explain strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It is typically taking a problem and looking at it just internally to the problem itself. And so you think about whatever the problem is as having a status quo, what it looks like today, and but the very fact that it exists as a status quo, as it exists in the way that it does, means it probably has some strengths that make it operable, that have made it what it exists at all. And so what are the internal strengths to it? Why is it relevant? Why is it valuable? And then looking at it internally too, it's a problem because, and now you can fly with all the reasons that it's a problem. And so those are the weaknesses of that problem. But if you think about what you're asking, of what your intervention is asking to do, of how you're solving for it, that's external to the problem itself. And so you can usually frame that as an external opportunity to take action. We talked about this as like, what would your protagonist do? What would happen if your protagonist did take action? Or a threat, something that would happen if they didn't. And so those are externalities, and then strengths and weaknesses are internalities to the problem. It can also be framed, this is an image of my colleague Margaret Hagan, who runs the Legal Design Lab at Stanford, and she's working at the design school at Stanford. And this is a big, whiteboard. And if we were in a good D-school space, we would all have our very own little group whiteboards, and we would be working off of this there. So another way to frame a SWOT is through positives and negatives. And so Margaret likes it, she arranges it a little bit differently. So she does on the vertical, current positives and current negatives, what is going well in the status quo, and what is going wrong in the status quo. And then on the other side, which I've called opportunities and threats, she calls future positives and future negatives. What could be going better and what could go wrong in the future. And so you can frame it either way you wish, but this heuristic makes an easy way of helping your lay reader understand the import and the value of what it is that you're arguing. And so this image, and we won't spend time reading it, it's in my deck though, is how Martha Crenshaw describes that visualization that we just laid, the bar chart that I just laid out. And she does it through strength, weakness, threat, and opportunity. And as I was saying, many op-eds end with that opportunity. And I'll just say, if you look at the end, like she's got this kind of surprising thing that she alights on as the final opportunity. So with that, I'm going to stop share just for a moment and look at you all again. And you have 5 minutes by yourself with a piece of paper. And I'd like you to draw it out as a SWOT. So again, if we had a nice whiteboard, we would just do it on a whiteboard and then we would share out. But draw it out as a SWOT: strength, weakness, opportunity, threat. Or if you're more comfortable, current positives, current negatives, future positives, future negatives. Draw it out just the way you saw it, and plug in your problem and your intervention. And you can, so you might have to do 2 different charts, one for the problem and one over here for each intervention. You can do SWOTs multiple times. But what will happen is as you populate those fields, you will start to see the evidence that your lay reader needs to understand. So that's what we're after here. It's a nice way of just laying out the data for your lay reader. You have 5 minutes, so we will end at 12:25. My time, whatever time it is your time, I don't know, probably the middle of the night for some of you. When you're done with your draft SWOT, if you would do me a favor and just take a picture with your phone and post it to our shared Google Drive with your name on it. And if you've got, some other title for it, that's great. Because then when I go in and look at your op-ed draft, I'll also look at your SWOT.
I just made a folder so you can upload it to that folder. Lucy, there is a question in the chat. It was to everyone. I don't know if you were able to read it.
Yeah, let's read it. So Nate, if you're, I'm sorry, Neil, you want to go ahead and read your question?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I seem to only be able to come up with negative things that would happen if there's a status quo. So
So usually the way that I frame it for myself, and I'll probe this a little bit more with you, but how did it become the status quo? Like, how did this thing emerge in the first place? And usually it emerges because some set of interests finds value in it. So those are the positives for whatever the set of interests might be. And so tell us what your problem is and let's see if we can help you with it.
Well, so I guess we got to the point because there are increasing restrictions on immigration and reduced. I guess I don't really the only thing I see is let's reduce immigration into the country as like the reason why that would be imposed.
Okay, so what's the value of reducing immigration?
Increasing jobs for Americans.
Okay, I mean, you may not agree with that, but that's what some of the logic is. So that's a positive. Great. Okay, what else do they use, especially in the American context, which is quite interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah, like, so I have a question here. Can we use the current immigration system as a positive? Like, because
it's the status quo, current immigration system. Oh yeah, unless you think that you're making an argument you want to continue it.
No, I was okay. I think I misunderstood.
I think it's the status quo.
Yeah.
And so Neil, I think the other way to frame it is as a public health issue. And so they are also framing it as a way of, quote, preserving public health for American citizens. So those are two positives that I can see immediately for it. And then there's probably economic value beyond jobs by reducing immigration. I don't know what the economic value would be, but I'm sure that, you know,
would you like be able to say that maybe some of your tax money would go to the schools that would then educate?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean,
yes. There you go. Now you're starting to think like them. Yeah, that's good. So you're putting yourself in the frame of whoever it is, yeah, that would find value in it. And Sema, did we answer your question? Are you comfortable now?
Yes, I was thinking of like in terms of current positives, and I got confused. Like, so I think that like what is going well, and so if we think like that,
and what's your problem? Tell me what your problem is.
It's the same problem. That's why.
Oh, immigration system, and so you want to solve for the immigration system in what way? How are you solving it? What do you want to do? Are you just showing that it's a problem, period, or do you have an intervention?
I think my intervention will be don't change the system. It's good now, but don't you? So they're proposing a new policy, and I'm against this new policy. Like, the system is good now. We have.
So the problem is the new policy.
Yes.
So take a look at the new policy. So what are they proposing as the positives of that new policy? What do you see as the negatives of that new policy? You know, what are the future opportunities or threats associated with it? And then you're going to counter all of that by saying, you know, basically don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here. So there's a lot of positives in the current value in the system. And I think you probably would do two SWOTs. You do one for the current policy, and then you would do one for the new policy, and then you would do one for the current system.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can do as many SWOTs as you want. Every time you have an intervention, do a SWOT for it. So, and it's exciting for me to see that some of you are unfamiliar with the SWOT. I've taught you something new. So excellent. All right, we are going to stop here, and I'm going to go back to my share screen and move right along with our next part of the show here. So
can I ask a quick question before?
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure, are we to think of the future negatives as the downsides of if our proposal gets implemented in a way, or is it the downsides of if it isn't followed up correctly?
I think you could do it both ways. And so tell me what your proposal is, and then I can help better.
I'm advocating for some nuclear science incorporation into education curriculums.
For education for what?
Education curricula.
Education curriculum. Okay. So the future positives are what would happen if this were implemented. Future negatives, what would happen if I guess that's interesting, if it wasn't implemented, but also what are the future negatives if it is implemented? So those are the caveats that you have to account for, because you will have readers who are not on board, who need to have their worries, their concerns ameliorated in your op-ed. So by acknowledging them and rebutting them very quickly, that's a good thing. That's a nice persuasive technique. So acknowledge and rebut very quickly, and that's what the SWOT can help you do. Great, excellent. Okay, so going back to share screen again. Share. There we go. Go away so I can get to my. There we go. So nearing the end of our session here today, when we meet for a consultation, I'd love to talk with you all about framing. Framing, if in my writing class, takes up probably 3 full classes where we think really strongly and empathetically about the values of the target audience. And in particular, if you're thinking about a lay audience, you want to think about where they're coming from, what their needs are, what their values are, what their economic situation is. And we basically try to build out this person that we're writing for as being, kind of the symbolic, representative audience. And then we frame for them, and we frame it in ideally through a common set of values. So we think about our own values, we think about what we care about, we think about what the values are that motivate the piece that we're writing, and then we try to find common values with the audience that we're writing for. And we take that commonality in the middle, and that's the sweet spot. That's where we go for it. So it may mean that we have to, reframe what we think of as the problem as, in terms of what it is that they would see as a problem, so that we can find some kind of, common ground by which to take action. It's a complex dialogue that you and I can have. I would look forward to it with you. And I just put this up here because this is just a fun, moment of like, think of all the values that are out there. There's 100 of them on this screen right here. And there's a really wonderful, if you ever have an opportunity to come to Stanford, there's a really wonderful version of this at the Stanford Business School, which is a piece of art that takes up an entire huge, probably 20-foot wall that just basically lights up each one of these values and scrolls through them, and then does this kind of fun little, graphic out of it. So if you ever have a chance to come to Stanford, go check it out. This is framing your message. I won't go into that, but these questions are here as you're thinking about how you want to frame your message for your audience. And then argument. So concision matters a lot. And in looking over your drafts, I saw that you all are good writers in that you advance your points very nicely, but you are complex thinkers who write complex words often and have lots of words in a sentence, and you can pack it together better. So when we meet, we will be talking a lot about concision and trying to make this as tight a frame as possible for your audience. This slide here is just here for your information. It says my internet connection is unstable. I'm hoping you can hear me. Seeing. So this slide is here just for your information. It's just the basic structure of a classic op-ed. You can refer to it in your own time. It's what we've already gone through: the lead, the hook, the issue, or the motive. There's often a credibility statement in there. You will remember, for example, in the Scientific American piece that on social media, that that writer took a moment and said, I am a scientist specializing in analyzing social media. And we understood that, and then we went down, we might have gone all the way down to the bottom and looked at his credibility statement at the end. But you might want to fold that in. I am a scientist who thinks about this because. We went through evidence, a little bit of counter argument and rebuttal in the terms of the SWOT. The return to motive and theme at the end. I flagged that for you in that opening analysis. You might introduce options for change, which is the interventions and how it could be managed, and recommendations. The final ask of what it is that you want your audience to do or your protagonist to do. And then you may have some next steps. but you also may not. Let's see what's going on. There we go. Okay, so this is the social media piece. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but you can see that he's got a really nice opening hook that leaves you with a rhetorical question. I chose this in part because many people, many new writers for op-eds will overuse the rhetorical question. It's a useful device. I think 1 or 2 is probably the maximum you want to use in an op-ed, and I have seen it used especially well not only in the opening but also as that kind of pivot in the middle, where the first third of the op-ed will be talking about the problem, and then it stops, break out one sentence, rhetorical question, asking something about, you know, what's going on here, and then it moves into the solution. And so use it sparingly and use it as a way of intriguing your audience, sometimes of proposing a counterintuitive for your audience. Make sure it's current, make sure you've got a problem that sets up the argument. We've talked about your thesis, your motive, your theme, and sometimes the argument is a surprising discovery. And often what you'll see, not often, sometimes what you will see is a op-ed that is, like I said, like the first third is the problem, and then there's this rhetorical question, and then the epiphany comes in the second half of it, in the second 2/3 of it. And that's the surprising discovery about, like, you didn't know this, but look at this, super neat. And then you'll have evidence for that discovery with counter argument and rebuttal. And the reason I also chose, go ahead, question.
Yes, there is a question. It is, can you please ask about credibility? How do we give credibility if we don't have a PhD yet or a terminal degree at this point?
You don't have to have a PhD to have credibility. You are a student of, you have studied X for, you know, a certain amount of time, or you care about this because those are all credibility. You'll notice that in the first op-ed that I showed by Catherine Cruz, we don't know what her credibility is. She just left it out, and that's very standard as well. But then at the very end, there is a little statement about who she is and the fact that she actually has graduated from the School of Public Health and has been working in this field. So if you've got that, make sure you use it, leverage it. I will say it's harder to get published without credibility, but there are ways of getting yourself out there, and you're building credibility over time. So just, you know, start now. It'll build over time. Eventually you'll have that PhD, or you will have, you know, the expertise that having done this for a number of years. And so it'll all come. So style, I also chose these particular op-eds for you because they all represent different kinds of style. And I thought this, you know, the classic one at the beginning by Catherine Cruz is just, you know, very straightforward. She just writes, you know, a very lay person's kind of style. I love this one by but from the social media problem, and here at the beginning is his credibility statement. As a scientist who studies networks, and we don't know if he has a PhD, we don't know how many years he's done it, and so I would think that ideally, you know, as you could probably say something like that, as a scientist who studies X. And then he says, I'm used to being surprised by the results of my experiments. So that's a credibility statement woven in with a, like, okay, I'm going to surprise you too. And then I wanted to highlight this for you. This is the motive that that carries the whole thing through. And it's the hinge that will take us into the rest of the explanation. And it's that one sentence that lies by itself, all alone. It's really good op-ed writing. The answer lies in something social media has amplified: influencers. Just a few words, one sentence, and now we know we're going to read about influencers and about the counterintuitive things that he has found regarding influencers. And so that's something to flag just as being really useful. And then each of these pieces that I chose for you has a different voice. But we have this feeling in each of them of knowing the writer, of feeling like, I kind of know you, like that you're speaking off of this page. And in part, it's because they're not using jargon. They're respecting us as being educated, interested, not necessarily expert in the field, but we feel this kind of mutual respect that goes back and forth. And so as you're developing your voice, think about that. Like, what's your stance here? You want to be as kind of, conversational as you can, without overdoing it, obviously, with your reader, so that they feel like you're really speaking to them. And then, of course, there's the turning point back into motive, which is what I flagged as that answer that lies in something social media has amplified. So, yes, go ahead.
So the question is, if we are writing about a topic not directly in our area of expertise, how do we cover our bases effectively? How much literature review would you recommend, or would it be necessary to have the article reviewed by someone more familiar with the topic?
Well, you're going to have a better chance of getting it published if the writer has expertise. I'll say that. If you don't have expertise in it, then what you may be sharing is something that only you have seen. And so it's unusual to your point of view. And so that's where I would say your credibility lies. Why is this something that you saw, that you think is important, or that others have seen but not written about? So I don't think you need a lit review in an op-ed, though you can, there are, we're going to talk about some venues in a few minutes, and there are venues where a lit review can be built in. So hold that thought and let me come back to that in just a minute. And so this is just a little set of guidelines about being simple and direct in keeping your voice lively. And so now we're going to move into this, where will you publish? And that's where I will bring up this point about how could you weave in a lit review, because it's a great question. So some places that you could publish are the big science journals, Nature, some of them, Scientific American, they have commentary as well as their research articles. And so if you have some expertise in the area, start writing commentary for them, send it in. The other answer to that question, actually, and I should have said this right out of the gate, if you don't have credibility yet, but you are working with someone who does, use their credibility by co-writing. And this is very common among scientists and researchers, where the professor will be the first name out of the gate. It's just like writing a science, a journal article, and your PI is the first name on it, but you did all the work. The op-ed can be that way too, except that it's usually not more than 2 and occasionally 3 writers. But have the big name that gets it into Nature, and then you'll have the 2 other people who are developing their expertise, developing their credibility, and they did the work. But their names are on it, and that counts. So then the next time you go to Nature, you can be like, last time I co-published with my PI, this time, this is from, straight from me. And Nature will now be willing to look at it because you've got some credibility built up with them. Other kind of industry journals, Scientific American, the New England Journal of Medicine, these have commentary sections. The American Economic Association on its website has a commentary page. Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. I work with a group of national security experts and fellows at Stanford, and they are commonly publishing in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. So I flag it here for you just because you look at your industry journals as a place to publish. For a really broad set of lay readers, the Huffington Post. And the Huffington Post loves research pieces from students around the world in their areas of expertise. And they will, go out of their way even for people who are just now building their credibility if it's an article that has a really strong current event and seems to be well researched and written. Here is a nod to your local venues, and I know some of you are coming from other countries, and I will just say that I've had students from India and Pakistan who've had very good luck publishing in their local national newspapers there in terms of commentary. So look to your local venues, see how many words you can publish there, reach out to their editors if you wish. Sometimes they'll respond in a very friendly way, and apply there. And then of course the op-ed accelerator is encouraging you to think locally, with the idea being that we are reaching out to our local communities. And so this is my moment where I get to say the Monkey Cage, my favorite venue for scientists and researchers. Monkey Cage is in the Washington Post. Global exposure, and it has hyperlinks to what could be your lit review. And so it will, including your own research. And so this particular example doesn't show, the link, the hyperlink to saying, my research, but many of them do have, the my research link, and it hyperlinks to their publication or their paper or their website. And so Monkey Cage is fantastic. It also allows you to publish more words. So Monkey Cage is typically like 1,500, sometimes 2,000 words. So you can really, get into the weeds of whatever the issue is. So if you are deeply steeped in an area and you have a lot of background material that you want to make sure you link to really instill your credibility into the piece you're writing, Monkey Cage is for you. They also pay, not a lot, but they do pay. So that's a nice one. And then finally, there is the National Science Policy Network, and that has its own blog. And this is where I get to do the great reveal, which is Catherine Cruz, goes by Cat Cruz, and she has a handle on Twitter, which is at Catherine Ann. But that wasn't flagged in of her piece originally. And so I can only guess that maybe she got the Twitter handle after she published that piece in June. But she's now got a new piece on the NSPN blog called about voting by mail. And so if you are looking to publish, if you have trouble publishing locally, you have trouble publishing in your industry journal, look to the NSPN blog to get your voice out there. And then finally, I'll just close with a couple of other thoughts, which is if you are thinking that you'd like to really, take some time to amplify your voice, really get the word out about, what it is that you are thinking about, you could start your own blog. And I have had students that I've worked with in the past who have, literally used my class to do nothing but develop their blog. And so every week or every few days, they'll have a new blog post, which is basically a new op-ed with hyperlinks out to lots of research on whatever their field is. And some of these blogs build up quite a lot of traction and attract quite a lot of attention.
Hi, everyone. I am not sure what happened, but I want to apologize for you for that. Zoom really,
My internet failed. That's what happened. No idea why. And weirdly, this is the first time it's happened in this situation. I have no idea what's going on. Super sorry about that, everyone. Lol is right. Thank you, Amanda. But here I am back. So I'm here I was pretty much at the end of my presentation, and I just was saying that if you haven't thought about starting your own blog, this is an opportunity to think about it, because it's a great way, if you are a prolific writer and you have an area of expertise, to really build up your credibility and get the word out. And sometimes those blogs can build quite a lot of traction and really elevate your profile. So with that, I have a couple of resources on the very last slide that I'll just flag for you here. They're in the slide deck, but I'll just flag them here, which is in addition to the op-ed accelerator, which links to the op-ed project. There is also the Harvard Kennedy School, and I will tell you a little bit about that in a minute. First, I just want to spend a second talking about the op-ed project. The op-ed project was started as a way, started about 10 years ago, as a way of amplifying what they were calling marginalized voices. And it still is true that something like, I don't know, 8 out of every 10 op-eds published in the world are published by men. And so there are, so that part of the mission of the op-ed project was to really focus on getting women's voices out there. Since that time, though, they have taken, they are, have opened themselves up. They are willing to work with literally anybody who is interested in developing their op-ed profile. And it's a particularly great opportunity. It costs a little bit of money, but you go to one of their half-day or full-day sessions and you're matched with a mentor in your field. Or it may not necessarily be in your field, but somebody who is a prolific op-ed writer who understands and can really, connect with you. And so, for example, my former boss at the Harvard Kennedy School, Professor Jeff Suglin, is one of those mentors. And so he's matched with, I think it's up to 10 people a year, and he mentors them through the op-ed writing process. And the idea is that with this mentoring, you then will become a published writer, and you have developed a relationship with somebody who is quite prolific in the field. The op-ed accelerator does the same kind of thing. And so I think it's less likely that you will be matched with a prolific writer. Am I right, Sindhu?
Yeah, so the editing is done by other NSPN members. And we kind of have a little page of guidelines for what you keep in mind when you edit a person's piece. It's a lot of the same things that Luci covered. So make sure you're concise and you minimize the use of jargon, and that you read with something that captures the reader's attention and is relevant to the community you're writing to. But it isn't like a senior professional op-ed or columnist in the field.
Great. So the third area that I will flag for you is the Harvard Kennedy School Communications Program. And so I helped to launch that program, and we produced a platform, a library of literally hundreds of materials dedicated to good policy writing. Some of those materials focus exclusively on op-eds. And so when you have time, you can just Google Harvard Kennedy School Communications op-ed. And one of the things that will pop up is the PDF that I put into our folder. But there are lots of other good materials there, including videos of other people like me talking about how to write an op-ed who have affiliations at the Kennedy School. So with those three bits of guidance and information to take you forward, I will leave now and say you're on your own for a moment. We're going to take, could I recommend some further reading on the SWOT? Oh gosh, just Google SWOT on the internet and you will come up with lots of really nice images of it and some good explanations of it. So I have known, where did I first learn? I learned SWOT at the Kennedy School. It's used a lot in public policy, and I don't even know where to tell you to go because it's kind of all over in the world of public policy. So you'll find lots of good resources out there, I think, if you just Google around for it. And also it's used in business operations as well. Any other questions before I close? Y'all are good? So we're going to leave you, we've got 8 minutes. If you'd like to take that last 8 minutes and go back to your breakout room and just check in with your partner and schedule a time when the two of you can meet for a longer process, maybe an hour. You can each bring your cup of coffee or whatever it is and talk about your work. And so I'm going to kick it over to Sindhu to send you off and say it's been a real pleasure getting to know you. I'd like to continue to work with you. And so as your pieces are posted in revised form, I'll start to give you commentary back. Go ahead, Sindhu.
So yeah, because I was a part of the purge, those breakout rooms no longer exist. I am happy to provide you with that, a new random partner, but I will also be sending out an email with a person that is meant to be your accountability buddy. So you'll connect you over email. Luci's email will also be in that message so that you can contact her with any other questions, as well as a kind of quick survey about your experience with this webinar, technical internet issues excluded, I guess, to see how well you felt you learned something, what maybe you would have wanted to know more about, or what you really liked or didn't like. So unfortunately, because I was a victim of this internet dilemma, I can't reconnect you this way. But if you really enjoyed talking to the person that you were in a breakout room with earlier, just reply to the email with the Zoom link, and I have no problem with making you two buddies, you know.
You could also just put a quick email in the chat. You could stick your email in the chat and flag it for whoever your partner was, and then we can pull it out of the chat that way too, and just take a few minutes to do that because we've got 6 minutes left in the session anyway. So yeah, great. So looking forward to seeing everybody again. Yes, thank you for being here. I'm super excited to get to read your work, especially as it gets, you know, closer and closer to revision and revised and publication. So excellent. All right, I'm going to go ahead and leave everybody here in the good hands of Sindhu, and you are sharing out your emails. So thanks a lot, everybody. I'll see you soon. Hopefully one-on-one sessions. Great. Take care.